Hey everyone, before we start today's story, I'd love for you to drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're listening from. Honestly, I've noticed the views have gone down recently, and it's been a little disheartening. But knowing you're here, connecting with these stories, really keeps me going. So please let me know you're here, and if the story touches you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It truly makes a difference. Now, let's dive in. The sleek glass walls of Grant Technologies headquarters reflected the early morning sunlight as Lucas Grant stood at his office window, his fingers pressed against the cool surface. At 32, he had built this company from scratch, transforming it from a small startup in his garage to a technological powerhouse that employed over 500 people. The view from the 42nd floor usually filled him with pride, but today it only reminded him of how far he could fall. The morning's financial reports lay scattered across his mahogany desk, each page telling the same story. They were hemorrhaging investors. The company's latest project, an innovative AI-driven security system, had encountered unexpected setbacks. The delays had spooked the market, and now investors were pulling out faster than autumn leaves falling from trees. Lucas loosened his perfectly knotted tie, a habit he'd developed during stressful situations. His reflection in the window showed a man who looked older than his years, dark circles under his eyes, his usually well-groomed dark hair slightly disheveled from running his hands through it countless times. His expensive charcoal suit, tailored to perfection, couldn't hide the weight of responsibility pressing down on his shoulders. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Still brooding, Mike Torres, his CFO and best friend since college, entered without waiting for a response. Mike was everything Lucas wasn't: relaxed, easygoing, and perpetually optimistic. Today, however, even Mike's usual smile seemed strained. "Have you seen the numbers?" Lucas asked, though he knew Mike had. Mike had probably been up all night analyzing them, just as he had. "Of course I have," Mike replied, dropping into one of the leather chairs facing Lucas's desk. "But unlike you, I've actually been working on solutions instead of trying to win a staring contest with the city skyline." Lucas turned away from the window, managing a small smile despite himself. This was why he and Mike worked so well together. Where Lucas could get lost in the gravity of a situation, Mike always found a way to pull him back to earth. "Enlighten me then," Lucas said. Settling into his chair, Mike pulled out his tablet, his fingers dancing across the screen. "I've been working on a new strategy. We can salvage this if we pivot the AI's application. Instead of focusing solely on security, we expand into healthcare monitoring. The potential market is huge, and more importantly, it's stable." Lucas leaned forward, his interest peaked. This was Mike at his best, seeing opportunities where others saw only obstacles. For the next hour, they discussed the details of Mike's proposal. The plan was solid, innovative, and exactly what they needed. There was just one problem. "We need capital," Lucas concluded, voicing what they both knew. "A lot of it." "I've already started reaching out to potential investors," Mike said, his expression serious. But given our current situation, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Their recent setbacks had made most investors wary. Lucas stood up, pacing the length of his office. The weight of responsibility felt heavier with each step. 500 employees depended on him. 500 families whose livelihoods rested on his ability to keep this company afloat. His phone buzzed, another message from Chloe. He glanced at it briefly before sliding the phone back into his pocket, unanswered. Their relationship had been strained lately, his constant focus on work, creating a distance that seemed to grow wider with each passing day. She was understanding, mostly, but he could sense her patience wearing thin. "You know," Mike began carefully, "your father could." "No." Lucas's response was immediate and firm. The mere suggestion made his jaw clench. "I built this company without his help, and I'll save it without his help too." Mike raised his hands in surrender, but Lucas could see the frustration in his friend's eyes. They'd had this conversation before, many times. The truth was, Maxwell Grant could solve their problems with a single phone call. His father's investment firm had the resources and connections to not only save Grant Technologies, but propel it to new heights. But Lucas had spent his entire adult life proving he was more than just Maxwell Grant's son. He remembered the day he'd announced his decision to start his own company instead of joining his father's firm. The disappointment in his father's eyes had been matched only by the determination in Lucas's heart. He'd refused the trust fund, turned down the corner office that had been waiting for him since birth, and struck out on his own. It hadn't been easy. He'd worked 18-hour days, lived in a tiny apartment, and put everything he had into building his dream. The success that followed had been sweeter because he'd earned it himself. Now, facing the possible collapse of everything he'd built, the temptation to swallow his pride and ask for help was strong. But the thought of proving his father right, that he needed the family money after all, was bitter enough to keep him resistant. "We have that meeting with Vertex Capital next week," Lucas said, changing the subject. "Their investment could be enough to get us through this." Mike nodded, though they both knew securing investment from Vertex was a long shot. The venture capital firm was notoriously selective, and their recent track record wasn't exactly impressive. As if reading his thoughts, Mike added, "We need a backup plan, Lucas. If Vertex doesn't pan out, then we'll find another way," Lucas interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Schedule meetings with every potential investor in the city if you have to. Someone will see the potential in this." Mike sighed but nodded, gathering his things to leave. At the door, he paused. "You should call Chloe. She's been asking about you." Lucas glanced at his phone again, guilt mixing with the stress that seemed to be his constant companion these days. Their last real conversation had been weeks ago, replaced by brief texts and expensive gifts he sent as apologies for his absence. Chloe deserved better, he knew that, but right now, he couldn't divide his focus. After Mike left, Lucas returned to the window. The city stretched out before him, a maze of possibilities and potential disasters. Somewhere out there was the solution to their problems. He just had to find it before it was too late. His phone buzzed again, another message from Chloe. This time he read it. "Dinner tonight? Miss you." Lucas stared at the message for a long moment before typing a quick response. "Can't tonight. Important meeting. We'll make it up to you this weekend." He added a heart emoji, hoping it would soften the rejection, knowing it probably wouldn't. Then, he turned back to the financial reports on his desk. The company had to come first. Everything else, including his relationship, would have to wait. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows across his office, Lucas immersed himself in work. He had built this company from nothing once before. He would find a way to save it now, no matter what it took. His independence had always been his greatest source of pride, and sometimes, as Mike often reminded him, his greatest weakness. But as he reviewed another disappointing financial report, a small voice in the back of his mind wondered how much longer he could keep this up, how much longer before the weight of it all became too much to bear alone. The answer to that question would come sooner than he expected, and in a way he never could have anticipated. But for now, Lucas Grant did what he did best. He pushed aside his doubts, straightened his tie, and got back to work. The fall might be coming, but he wasn't going down without a fight. The early morning sun barely peeked through the curtains of Keisha Brown's modest apartment as she stared at her laptop screen, refreshing her email for the 100th time. Another rejection letter from a job application glared back at her. She sighed, running her fingers through her curly dark hair, trying to maintain her usually optimistic spirit despite the setback. 3 months had passed since the layoff at Sterling Corp, where she'd worked as a marketing coordinator. The memory of that day still stung, being called into the conference room alongside dozens of her colleagues, hearing the rehearsed speech about budget cuts and outsourcing. She'd maintained her composure until she reached her car, where the tears finally fell. "Girl, you're going to be late," Trisha's voice called from the kitchen, accompanied by the smell of coffee and toast. "And you know how Marcus gets about tardiness." Keisha closed her laptop and stretched, her eyes catching sight of the framed photo on her desk, herself, her mother, and her younger sister Sarah, at Sarah's high school graduation 2 years ago. The image of her mother's proud smile that day was a stark contrast to her current condition, confined to a hospital bed back in their hometown. "Coming!" Keisha called back, quickly changing into her waitress uniform, a crisp white shirt and black pants. She'd learned to iron her uniform with military precision. The high-end restaurant where she now worked had strict standards about appearance. In the kitchen, Trisha was already dressed in her chef's whites, her dark hair neatly tucked under her cap. She pushed a travel mug of coffee and a piece of toast toward Keisha. "Eat. You barely touched dinner last night." "Thanks, Mom," Keisha teased, though she was genuinely grateful. Trisha had been more than just a roommate since they met in college. She was family. "Someone has to take care of you," Trisha replied, her tone softening. "Any word from the hospital?" Keisha's smile faltered slightly. "Aunt Janet called last night. Mom's doing okay, but the doctors are still monitoring her condition. Sarah's been picking up extra shifts at her part-time job to help with the bills. And you're still sending most of your paycheck home," Trisha stated rather than asked. They'd had this conversation before. "What choice do I have?" Keisha grabbed her bag, checking to make sure her freelance writing materials were inside. She'd been picking up whatever writing gigs she could find online, working late into the night after her shifts. "Mom can't work, and Sarah needs to focus on college. I'm the oldest. It's my responsibility." Trisha's expression was a mixture of concern and admiration. "Just don't forget to take care of yourself too. Now come on, we're going to be late." The drive to LeBlanc, the upscale restaurant where they both worked, was filled with their usual morning banter. Trisha's animated stories about the kitchen drama and her latest culinary experiments always managed to lift Keisha's spirits. "Oh, and heads up," Trisha mentioned as they pulled into the parking lot. "Marcus mentioned we have some VIP business lunch reservations today. Apparently, some big-shot tech CEO is meeting with investors." Keisha nodded, mentally preparing herself. LeBlanc's clientele consisted mainly of the city's elite, CEOs, politicians, and socialites who expected perfection with every course. It was a far cry from her corporate marketing job, but the tips were good, and more importantly, it was steady income when her family needed it most. The morning prep went smoothly, and by lunch rush, the restaurant was buzzing with activity. Keisha moved between tables with practiced grace, her natural charm and quick wit, making her popular with regular customers. She'd learned to wear a mask of calm efficiency, regardless of what was happening in her personal life. But today, her mask was slipping. During a brief break, she'd checked her phone to find 3 missed calls from her aunt. When she finally managed to call back, the news made her heart sink. Her mother's condition had worsened, and the doctors were recommending surgery. The estimated costs made her head spin. "Keisha?" Mr. Caldwell's voice snapped her back to reality. "Table 12, the private dining room. Very important clients. I need you focused." "Of course," she replied automatically, straightening her posture and forcing her professional smile back into place. She couldn't afford to let personal matters affect her work, not when every tip counted. The private dining room held 4 men in expensive suits. Keisha recognized the type immediately. Young executives who probably spent more on their watches than she made in months. The youngest of them, Lucas Grant, sitting at the head of the table, carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from success rather than inheritance. Under different circumstances, she might have found him handsome. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," she began her usual greeting, but her mind was elsewhere, calculating hospital bills, trying to figure out how many extra shifts she'd need to pick up. She took their orders, her usually sharp memory failing her slightly as she mixed up their preferences. When she returned with the bottles, her hands weren't as steady as they should have been. The inevitable happened. A slight tremor, a miscalculated angle, and suddenly dark red wine was seeping into the sleeve of Lucas's obviously expensive suit. "I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, mortification mixing with panic. She couldn't afford to lose this job. Lucas's reaction was immediate and harsh, his previous professional demeanor cracking. "Oh my God. Can you watch it? Do you have any idea how much this suit costs?" he demanded, standing abruptly. "I'll get something to clean that right away," she offered, but her attempts at damage control were interrupted by a commotion from another corner of the table. One of the other men was showing signs of distress, his face reddening and swelling. "Are you all right, sir?" Lucas's companion, Mike, asked, alarm evident in his voice. The situation spiraled quickly. The man was having an allergic reaction. Apparently, she'd mixed up not just the wines but also their food orders. Panic erupted at the table. Mike leapt to his feet, rushing around to pat the man's back. "What was in this dish?" he demanded, looking wildly at Keisha. Keisha's heart dropped into her stomach. She scanned her notepad and felt the blood drain from her face. She had written the wrong order. "Shellfish," she whispered, horror dawning. "Call emergency!" someone shouted. Staff scrambled, voices rising. Lucas stood frozen, his fury boiling as he watched the investor struggle to breathe. This was it. The deal. His last chance shattered because of her. Within minutes, paramedics arrived and whisked the investor away. Mike went with them, clutching the man's briefcase and promising to update Lucas later. The restaurant quieted, the chaos leaving behind a heavy, suffocating silence. Lucas turned slowly, his gaze locking on Keisha. His eyes were dark, sharp enough to cut. "What?" he said, his voice dangerously calm. "Is wrong with you?" Keisha flinched. The restaurant staff nearby froze, listening. His voice rose, anger breaking through the facade. "You nearly killed a man. Do you understand that? You're incompetent, careless. How are you even employed here?" Tears stung Keisha's eyes, but she bit her lip hard, refusing to let them fall. She wanted to scream that she was exhausted, that her life was unraveling, that she was trying so hard just to hold everything together. But all that came out was a choked whisper. "I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this," Lucas snapped. "Sorry doesn't bring back the opportunity you just cost me." Mr. Caldwell, the manager, appeared, rendering sincere apologies to Lucas, and then turning to face Keisha. "Keisha, my office, now." Her stomach sank. She didn't need to hear the words. She already knew. As she followed her manager, the humiliation burned hotter than her tears. Behind her, Lucas sat down heavily, his ruined sleeve sticking damply to his arm, his company's future hanging by a thread. Keisha sat stiffly in Mr. Caldwell's office, the muffled sounds of clinking glasses and quiet conversations from the restaurant fading behind the closed door. The office was small, lined with filing cabinets and smelling faintly of disinfectant. Her manager, Mr. Caldwell, leaned against the desk, his arms folded across his chest. He was a short man with a permanent scowl, the kind of boss who rarely gave praise and never forgot mistakes. "Keisha," he began, his voice sharp but weary. "Do you realize what just happened out there?" Her hands twisted together in her lap. I know. I mixed up the order. I didn't mean—" "You didn't mean," Caldwell cut in, his tone rising. "You nearly killed one of our most important guests, Lucas Grant, his investors. Do you think people like that forget something like this? This could ruin the restaurant's reputation." Tears pricked at her eyes. She blinked hard, willing them away. "Please, I need this job. My mom's sick, and my sister." His expression softened for a fraction of a second, then hardened again. "I'm sorry, Keisha. I can't overlook this. It's not just tonight. Your performance has been slipping for weeks. Mistakes, lateness. I can't keep covering for you. You're done here." The words landed like a physical blow. Her breath caught in her throat, and she gripped the arms of the chair as if to steady herself. Done. Fired. Again. Caldwell handed her a small envelope with her final pay. "You'll need to clear out your locker by tomorrow. Good luck." She rose on unsteady legs, clutching the envelope like a lifeline. The room blurred slightly as she turned to leave. Outside, the warm glow of the restaurant mocked her, the laughter of patrons a cruel soundtrack to her humiliation. Later that evening, Keisha sat on their small apartment balcony, still in her uniform, staring at the city lights. Trisha sat beside her, 2 glasses of wine between them. "It's not the end of the world," Trisha said softly. "We'll figure something out. Maybe it's a sign. You're meant for better things than serving wine to entitled executives anyway." Keisha managed a weak smile. Those entitled executives tipped well enough to help pay for Mom's medications. She pulled out her phone, looking at the latest freelance writing job listings. "I'll just have to work harder at the writing gigs until I find another job." "You could tell your mom about the layoff now," Trisha suggested gently. "She'd understand." Keisha shook her head firmly. "She has enough to worry about. I'll find something else before she needs to know." She didn't add what they both knew, that her mother would try to refuse further help if she knew Keisha was struggling, and that Sarah would likely drop out of college to work full-time. The night grew cooler as they sat in companionable silence. Somewhere in the city, a siren wailed, perhaps an ambulance rushing someone else's loved one to the hospital. Keisha thought about the man from the restaurant, hoping he was okay, feeling guilty despite the circumstances. "You know what's ironic?" she finally said, breaking the silence. "In my old job, I once gave a presentation about crisis management in the service industry. Talked all about maintaining composure under pressure, preventing small issues from becoming big problems." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Look how well I managed today's crisis." Trisha reached over and squeezed her hand. "Everyone has bad days, even perfect Keisha Brown." "I'm far from perfect," Keisha murmured, thinking of all the balls she was trying to juggle. Her mother's health, Sarah's education, her own career, or what was left of it. Her phone buzzed, Sarah calling for their nightly check-in. Keisha took a deep breath, preparing to put on her strong big sister voice. She couldn't let Sarah know about losing her job or about today's disaster. One of them needed to believe everything was under control. "Hey, little sis," she answered, her voice steady and warm, as if she hadn't just had one of the worst days of her life. "How are classes going?" As she listened to Sarah's excited chatter about her latest psychology lecture, Keisha made silent promises to herself. She would find another job, a better one. She would figure out how to pay for her mother's surgery. She would keep her sister in college. She would fix everything. But for now, she let herself lean on Trisha's shoulder, drawing strength from her friend's unwavering support, watching the city lights twinkle like distant stars. Tomorrow would be another day, another chance to get things right. She just had to keep going, keep trying, keep believing that somehow everything would work out. What she didn't know then was that the wine-stained suit and the allergic reaction would set in motion a chain of events that would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, she just needed to breathe, to rest, to gather her strength for whatever challenges lay ahead. The elevator ride to the top floor of Grant Industries felt longer than usual. Lucas stood beside Mike, both men silent as they ascended to Maxwell Grant's office. After the disaster at LeBlanc and losing their chance with the Vertex Capital investors, they were down to their last option, the very one Lucas had spent years avoiding. "You're sure about this?" Mike asked, glancing at his friend's reflection in the polished elevator doors. Lucas adjusted his tie, a new one, replacing the wine-stained casualty from the restaurant incident. "Do I have a choice?" The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area that screamed old money and power. Charlotte, his father's secretary for the past 20 years, looked up from her desk with surprise. "Lucas, your father's expecting you," she said warmly, though her eyes held a hint of concern. Everyone knew Lucas never came here unless absolutely necessary. Maxwell Grant's office was exactly as Lucas remembered: imposing mahogany furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view of the city that made his own office look modest in comparison. His father stood at the window, his silver hair and perfectly tailored suit creating the image of success that had intimidated Lucas throughout his childhood. "Lucas," Maxwell turned, his expression unreadable. "And Mike, it's been a while." "See, Dad," Lucas nodded, keeping his voice professional. "Thank you for meeting with us." Maxwell gestured to the seats in front of his desk, taking his own leather chair with the practiced ease of a man accustomed to power. "So, what brings my independent son to my office?" Lucas could hear the subtle emphasis on independent, but he pushed ahead. For the next hour, he and Mike presented their situation, their plans, and their needs. Maxwell listened silently, his fingers steepled under his chin, his eyes never leaving Lucas's face. When they finished, Maxwell leaned back in his chair. "It's a solid plan," he admitted. "The healthcare angle is particularly promising." Lucas felt a flicker of hope, quickly extinguished by his father's next words. "But I have concerns about stability," Maxwell continued. "Not of the business, of you, Lucas." "Excuse me? You're 32, solely focused on work, no personal life to speak of. That's not the image that inspires long-term confidence in investors." Lucas felt his jaw tighten. "My personal life has nothing to do with my company's potential." "On the contrary," Maxwell stood, walking to a framed photo on his wall, himself and Lucas's mother on their wedding day. "Family stability translates to business stability in our circles. Your mother and I have been asking you about settling down for years." "You can't be serious," Lucas started, but Maxwell held up a hand. "My terms are simple. Get married, show that you're capable of building something lasting beyond business deals, and I'll not only invest but also bring in my connections. More capital than you're asking for, with very flexible terms." The silence that followed was deafening. Mike shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "This is ridiculous," Lucas finally said, standing. "You're using my company's situation to manipulate my personal life?" "I'm offering you a solution that benefits everyone," Maxwell replied calmly, "including that girlfriend you claim to have but keep low-key." "What was her name again?" Lucas felt his face heat up. "Chloe." He hadn't spoken to her in weeks, too consumed with work to do more than send occasional texts and gifts. The guilt hit him suddenly. When was the last time they'd actually had a real conversation? "Think about it," Maxwell said, clearly reading the conflict on his son's face. "You have my terms." The drive back to Grant Technologies was silent until Mike finally spoke. "It's not the worst idea, you know. You do have Chloe. Lucas gripped the steering wheel tighter. I haven't even seen her in weeks. Then maybe it's time you did, Mike suggested gently. When was the last time you two had a proper date? Lucas couldn't remember, and that realization made him feel worse. He pulled out his phone at a red light, scrolling through his messages with Chloe. The pattern was clear. Her reaching out, him responding with brief excuses and promises to make it up to her. That evening, he sent her a text. Dinner tomorrow night? I miss you. Her response came hours later. Sure. Pick me up at 7. The next evening, Lucas arrived at Chloe's apartment building, a bouquet of her favorite flowers in hand. She emerged wearing a stunning black dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The restaurant he chose was intimate and expensive, one of those places that required reservations weeks in advance, unless you had the right name. They were seated in a private corner, wine was poured, and an uncomfortable silence settled between them. You look beautiful, Lucas offered. Thank you, Chloe replied politely. Too politely. How's work? He paused, realizing he was about to launch into company talk again. Actually, I wanted to talk about us tonight. Us? Chloe raised an eyebrow. There's been an us to talk about lately. The hint of bitterness in her voice made him wince. I know I've been distant. Distant? She interrupted, setting down her wine glass. Lucas, do you know what my favorite color is? The question caught him off guard. He glanced at her dress. Black? White, she corrected. My favorite food? Italian? He guessed weakly. Thai. When's my birthday, Lucas? He felt his stomach drop. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Last Thursday, she finished for him. I turned 29 last Thursday, and you didn't even notice. Chloe, I'm so sorry. I've been dealing with some major issues at the company. You're always dealing with major issues at the company, she cut him off. For the past year, it's been nothing but the company. Do you know what I did on my birthday? I sat at home, staring at my phone, wondering if you'd remember. My friends wanted to take me out, but I told them I was spending the evening with you. The guilt was overwhelming now. I'll make it up to you, he said, reaching for her hand across the table. In fact, I've been thinking about our future. What if we got married? Chloe withdrew her hand as if burned. Excuse me? I love you, he said, but the words sounded hollow even to his ears. We've been together for a while now, and… Stop. She held up a hand. Just stop. Why are you really proposing, Lucas? He hesitated too long. Tell me the truth, she demanded. Under her intense stare, he cracked. My father. He's willing to invest in the company if I get married. Show stability. Chloe's laugh was bitter. Wow. Just wow. You ignore me for weeks, forget my birthday, and then propose because your daddy made it a business condition? That's not the only reason. What's my middle name, Lucas? He opened his mouth, then closed it. It's Marie. We've been dating for over a year, and you don't even know my middle name. She stood up, gathering her purse. I can't do this anymore. I won't be your business transaction. Chloe, please, don't call me. Don't text me. Don't send expensive gifts thinking they'll make up for your absence. We're done. She walked out of the restaurant, leaving Lucas alone with an untouched meal and the weight of his failures pressing down on him. Later that night, in his penthouse office, Lucas stared at his phone. Dozens of missed calls from Mike, a message from his father asking about his decision, and a final text from Chloe. I've blocked your number. Please respect that it's over. He poured himself a drink, loosening his tie. The company's latest financial reports lay spread across his desk, numbers that kept getting worse. Without his father's investment, they had weeks, maybe months, before things became irreparable. Mike found him there hours later, still in his suit, staring at nothing. "I heard about Chloe," Mike said quietly, taking the seat across from him. "I'm sorry, man." "She was right," Lucas replied, his voice rough. "About all of it. I treated our relationship like another business matter to be managed. So what now?" Lucas ran a hand through his hair. Now we're completely screwed. No investor, no girlfriend turned fiancé, and a company that's bleeding out." Mike was quiet for a moment, then, what if? What if we found someone else? Someone to play the part? Lucas looked at his friend like he'd lost his mind. "What are you talking about? Think about it. Your father's condition is marriage, right? He didn't specify it had to be Chloe. You're suggesting we hire someone to pretend to be my fiancé?" Lucas asked incredulously. "Why not? It's a business arrangement. Clean, simple, with clear terms and conditions." Lucas stood up, pacing the room. "This is insane. Even if we found someone willing to do it, the risks are less than losing everything you've built," Mike finished. "Just think about it. We're running out of options here." Lucas stopped at his window, looking out at the city lights. His company, his dreams, everything he'd worked for hung in the balance. And somewhere out there, he thought, was someone desperate enough to agree to such an arrangement. He had no idea that he'd already met her, the waitress whose life he'd inadvertently turned upside down, and who would soon turn his world upside down in return. "Fine," he said finally, turning back to Mike. "Find me some candidates, but they have to be perfect. Someone convincing. Someone who can handle the scrutiny of high society. Someone like the opposite of you," Mike suggested with a slight smile. "Maybe that's exactly what you need." Lucas didn't respond, but as he looked back out at the city, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was about to step onto a path that would change everything. He just didn't know how much. 2 mornings after the Chloe disaster, Lucas found himself staring at a series of profiles Mike had compiled of potential candidates for their fake fiancé scheme. Each woman came with impressive credentials, successful careers, social connections, the kind of background that would fit seamlessly into the Grant family narrative. "Nope, too polished," Lucas said, pushing away the tablet. "My father would see right through it." Mike, sprawled in his usual chair across from Lucas's desk, raised an eyebrow. "Isn't polished exactly what we need?" "We need authentic," Lucas corrected, standing to pour himself another coffee. "Someone real enough to be believable, but with enough incentive to keep the arrangement strictly business. You're impossible to please, you know that?" Mike sighed. "Fine. I'll keep looking." Lucas needed air. The office felt suffocating with the weight of their desperate plan. "I'm going for coffee," he announced, grabbing his jacket. "You literally just poured yourself a cup," Mike pointed out. "Real coffee, not this office stuff." The cafe was a small place tucked away from the main business district, somewhere Lucas could avoid running into anyone from his social circle. He was on the phone with Mike, still discussing their predicament, when fate decided to intervene in the most literal way possible. The collision was sudden, a warm splash of coffee, scattered papers, and a familiar face looking up at him with equal parts shock and dismay. It was her, the waitress from LeBlanc. She didn't recognize him at first, busy scrambling to gather her scattered documents. Lucas automatically bent to help, his phone conversation forgotten, as he picked up what appeared to be a resume. Their eyes met, and recognition dawned on both their faces. "You," they said simultaneously, her voice accusing, his surprised. Keisha Brown. Quody remembered her from the incident report, quickly snatched her papers from his hands, coffee staining his pristine white shirt forgotten in her haste to get away from him. "Wait," he called out, something clicking in his mind as he watched her storm off. He picked up his phone again. "Mike, I think I found our candidate." "What?" Who? Remember the waitress from LeBlanc? Mike's laugh was incredulous. The one who nearly killed our investor with an allergic reaction? Are you insane? Think about it, Lucas said, watching Keisha's retreating figure. She's real. She's obviously in need of work, and she has every reason to keep things strictly professional. Or every reason to sabotage you, Mike pointed out. Lucas, this is crazy even for our current level of desperate. Do some research on her, Lucas insisted. Everything you can find. The next few days were a deep dive into Keisha Brown's life. Mike, despite his reservations, was thorough. Each new piece of information painted a clearer picture. A hardworking marketing professional laid off from Sterling Corp., a single daughter supporting her sick mother and putting her sister through college. A series of freelance writing gigs that barely covered the mounting medical bills. Her mother needs surgery, Mike reported, scrolling through his findings. Expensive surgery. And her sister's tuition is due soon. Lucas leaned back in his chair, processing. Perfect. Perfect? Mike looked up sharply. Lucas, we're talking about using someone's family crisis to our advantage. That's cold, even for you. We're talking about a mutually beneficial arrangement, Lucas corrected. She needs money. We need a convincing fiancé. It's business. Mike wasn't convinced. And how exactly do you plan to propose this business arrangement to someone who probably hates you? Lucas smiled. A plan already forming. First, we make sure she has no other options. Over the next few days, Lucas tracked Keisha's movements. She frequented a particular cafe, usually with her laptop, clearly job hunting. He watched her from a distance, noting how she maintained her dignity despite her circumstances, how she smiled warmly at the cafe staff despite her own troubles. Then came the hospital bill. Through careful maneuvering and a few well-placed calls, Lucas arranged to anonymously cover her mother's immediate medical expenses. It wasn't charity, it was strategy. He needed her desperate enough to consider his offer, but grateful enough to not immediately reject it. Finally, on a quiet afternoon, he made his move. Keisha was at her usual table, focused on her laptop, when Lucas slid into the seat across from her. Her reaction was immediate, recognition, followed by anger. "You have got to be kidding me. Miss Brown," he began, but she was already gathering her things. "Whatever this is, I'm not interested. I have a business proposition for you." That stopped her. She paused, curiosity warring with suspicion. "A business proposition? From the man who got me fired? As I recall, you got yourself fired by nearly killing my investor," he countered, then immediately regretted his tone when she started to stand again. "Wait, please, just hear me out." Maybe it was the please that did it, or maybe she was just tired enough to be curious. Either way, she slowly sat back down. "5 minutes," she said firmly. Lucas glanced around the cafe, then lowered his voice. "I need a fiancé." Keisha stared at him for a long moment, then burst out laughing. "Goodbye, Mr. Grant," she said, reaching for her bag. "I'll cover your mother's medical bills," he said quickly. "All of them. And your sister's tuition." She froze. "How do you know about my family?" "The same way I knew to help with the recent hospital bill." Her eyes widened. "That was you? Consider it a down payment on our potential arrangement." He leaned forward, holding her gaze. "I need someone to play the role of my fiancé for a few months. In return, I'll ensure your family is taken care of financially." "You're insane," she said, but she hadn't left yet. "I'm practical," he corrected. "You need money. I need a convincing fiancé to secure an investment. It's a simple business arrangement." "There's nothing simple about pretending to be engaged to someone," Keisha argued, "especially someone I don't even like." "The feeling is mutual," Lucas assured her, "which makes it perfect. No risk of real emotions complicating things." She studied him for a long moment, and he could see her mind working, calculating bills, weighing options, considering consequences. "Why me?" she finally asked. "You could hire any actress or model. I don't know. Maybe because my gut tells me you're real," he said honestly. "You have genuine reasons for entering this arrangement, and you're smart enough to understand the importance of discretion." Keisha ran a hand through her curls, a gesture he was beginning to recognize as her thinking move. "This is crazy," she muttered. "Maybe," he agreed, pulling out his business card and sliding it across the table. "But sometimes crazy is the only option left." He stood, straightening his jacket. "Think about it. Call me if you're interested." He left her there, staring at his card, knowing he'd planted the seed. Now, he just had to wait. "Well?" Mike asked, when Lucas returned to the office. "She'll call," Lucas said confidently, though his heart was beating faster than he cared to admit. "How can you be sure?" "Because she has no choice." He looked out his office window, remembering the flash of determination he'd seen in Keisha's eyes. "And because she's exactly like me, willing to do whatever it takes to protect what matters to her." Days passed. Lucas tried to focus on work, but he found himself checking his phone more often than usual. He told himself it was just anxiety about the company, not about whether she would call. Then, late one evening, his phone rang. An unknown number. "I didn't ask for your help," her voice said when he answered. "Hello to you too, Miss Brown. With the hospital bill," she clarified. "I didn't ask for your help. Would you have accepted it if I had offered?" She was quiet for a moment. What exactly would this arrangement entail? Lucas smiled, knowing he had her. "Why don't we meet to discuss the details? Dinner tomorrow?" Another pause. "Just to talk," she said firmly. "Just to talk," he agreed. After he hung up, he sat in his office for a long time, staring at his phone. He'd gotten what he wanted. She was considering the arrangement. So why did he feel like he was the one being pulled into something beyond his control? In her apartment across town, Keisha sat on her bed, staring at Lucas's business card, her heart racing with a mixture of anxiety and determination. Was she really considering this crazy proposition? Pretending to be engaged to a man she barely knew and didn't particularly like? Her phone buzzed with a text from her aunt, another update about her mother's condition. The decision crystallized in that moment. Sometimes, crazy was the only option left. Neither of them knew it then, but that phone call was the beginning of something neither had bargained for, a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about business, relationships, and themselves. The proposition had been made. The seed had been planted, and somewhere in the universe, fate was probably laughing at the chaos about to unfold. The private dining room at La Maison, an exclusive French restaurant on the city's west side, felt like neutral territory for their meeting. Lucas had arrived early, selecting a secluded table that offered privacy for their unusual negotiation. When Keisha walked in, he noticed she'd made an effort to dress for the occasion, a simple but elegant navy blue dress that spoke of understated class rather than trying too hard. "You clean up well," he commented as she took her seat. "If we're going to discuss me pretending to be your fiancé, you should know I hate condescending compliments," she replied smoothly, unfolding her napkin. Lucas couldn't help but smile. Her directness was refreshing after years of navigating the carefully worded niceties of high society. Noted, "Shall we order first or dive straight into business?" "Business," Keisha said firmly. "I want to know exactly what I'm considering before I decide if I'm staying for dinner." Lucas nodded, pulling out a folder he'd prepared. "The basics are simple. I need to appear stable and settled to secure my father's investment in my company. That means presenting a convincing engagement and eventual marriage." "How long?" 2 years, minimum." The first few months as an engaged couple, then a wedding, followed by at least 18 months of marriage before an amicable divorce. Keisha's eyes widened slightly. 2 years of pretending to be in love with you. Think of it as a long-term acting job, Lucas suggested. With very good pay. He slid a document across the table. Keisha's hands trembled slightly as she read the figures. This island, substantial, she said carefully. It includes coverage of all medical expenses for your mother, your sister's complete college tuition, and a monthly stipend for you, plus a final settlement after the divorce. Keisha set down the paper, studying him. Why go to all this trouble? Surely there are easier ways to get investment. Not from my father, Lucas said grimly. He's traditional, believes in the stability of family values. So you're willing to fake an entire marriage to prove him wrong? To prove him right, actually. Lucas leaned back, swirling his wine. He believes I need marriage to be stable. I'm proving I can handle both marriage and business successfully. While lying to everyone? Keisha pointed out. Says the woman who hasn't told her family she'd long lost her job. Her eyes flashed. That's different, is it? We both lie to protect what matters to us. The waiter arrived with their appetizers, creating a brief pause in the conversation. When he left, Keisha spoke softly. What would this actually involve? Day to day? Lucas pulled out another document. We'd need to live together. My penthouse has plenty of space. You'd attend business functions, family events, charity galas. We'd need to be seen together regularly, building a public narrative of our relationship. And private moments? Separate bedrooms, he assured her quickly. Though we'd need to be comfortable with some physical contact in public, hand-holding, casual touches, the occasional kiss for show. Keisha took a sip of water, considering. And my career? You can continue your freelance work, but it would need to take second place to our public appearances. However, he added, seeing her frown, I can arrange for some marketing consulting work through my connections. Keep your skills sharp. They spent the next hour going through details, everything from public backstory to private boundaries. Lucas had to admit, Keisha's questions were thorough and intelligent, catching potential issues he hadn't considered. We'd need to know each other, she said suddenly. Really know each other, not just facts on paper. Real couples have inside jokes, shared experiences, little details that can't be faked. Lucas nodded. We have a few weeks before meeting my family. We can use that time to build our story. Starting now, Keisha decided, sitting up straighter. Tell me something real about yourself, not business-related. Lucas hesitated, caught off guard by the request. I also hate shellfish. Can't stand the texture. Really? Keisha's lips twitched. The great Lucas Grant has food texture issues? Your turn, he countered, oddly pleased to see her genuine amusement. I cry at coffee commercials, she admitted. The sappy ones about family coming home for the holidays? Waterworks, every time. Something shifted in the atmosphere between them. A slight thaw in the formal business discussion. By the time dessert arrived, they had exchanged childhood stories, embarrassing moments, and enough personal details to start building a foundation for their deception. The next few weeks were a crash course in becoming a couple. They met daily, sometimes for hours, learning each other's habits, preferences, and histories. Lucas learned that Keisha hummed when she was thinking hard, had a slight addiction to true crime podcasts, and could quote entire episodes of Friends from memory. She discovered his secret love for science fiction novels, his inability to cook anything more complex than toast, and his habit of talking to himself when solving problems. The photo shoot was Mike's idea. We need pictures showing your relationship development, he insisted. They spent a Sunday with a professional photographer, staging casual moments that would create their relationship timeline on social media. Lean in closer, the photographer directed as they posed on a park bench. Lucas, put your arm around her shoulders. Keisha turned slightly toward him. Lucas felt Keisha tense slightly as he pulled her closer. Her hair smelled like lavender, and he found himself noticing how perfectly she fit against his side. Now look at each other, the photographer called. Think about what you love about each other. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Lucas forgot they were acting. There was something in Keisha's warm brown eyes that made his heart skip a beat, a mixture of vulnerability and strength that he hadn't noticed before. Perfect. The photographer's voice broke the spell. The chemistry between you two is amazing. Keisha pulled away first, smoothing her dress. We should check the lighting on those shots, she said, her voice slightly unsteady. Later that week, they sat in Lucas's living room, surrounded by shopping bags. His sister Charlotte was coming to dinner the next night, their first test as a couple. Quiz me again, Keisha said, trying on different earrings. Where did we first meet? At a charity gala for children's education. I was there representing Sterling Corp's community outreach program. You spilled your drink on my dress, insisted on having it cleaned, and asked for my number to check if the dry cleaning was successful. When did I propose? Last month, during a weekend trip to the coast. Private dinner on the beach. Very romantic but low-key because you know I hate big gestures. Lucas watched her practice their story, noting how naturally she incorporated little details they'd learned about each other. She was good at this, maybe too good. He found himself having to remind himself more often that this was all an act. What are you thinking? Keisha asked, catching his reflection in the mirror. Well, that you're a better actress than I expected. She turned to face him, her expression serious. Is that a problem? No, he said slowly. It's just, we need to be careful. Keep the lines clear. The lines are very clear, Lucas, she said firmly. This is business, nothing more. But as she turned back to the mirror, adjusting her necklace, the one he'd bought her for public appearances, Lucas wasn't sure the lines were as clear as they both pretended. There were moments, brief ones, when he caught himself forgetting this was all an arrangement. Moments when her laugh seemed too genuine, her touch too natural, her presence too right in his space. Your sister, Keisha said, breaking into his thoughts. Does she like wine? Red, preferably Italian. And she's allergic to shellfish, like you? No, that's just me. Lucas smiled, touched that she remembered. But she does have a peanut allergy, noted. Keisha pulled out her phone, adding it to her notes. No peanuts in the appetizers. Lucas watched her plan their dinner, handling every detail with the same determination she brought to everything. She'd insisted on cooking herself. Real couples don't always eat out or order in, she'd argued. You know, he said suddenly, you don't have to try so hard. Charlotte will love you. Keisha paused in her planning. How can you be sure? Because you're exactly what she's always wanted for me. Someone real, someone who challenges me, someone who, he trailed off, realizing he was saying too much. Someone who what? Keisha prompted softly. Someone who sees me. He finished quietly. Their eyes met in the mirror again, and that dangerous something flickered between them. Keisha broke it first, returning to her notes. Well, let's hope your father sees the same thing, she said practically. Lucas nodded, pushing away the unsettling feelings her presence was stirring. This was business, he reminded himself. Just business. But as he watched her move around his space like she belonged there, he wondered if either of them really believed that anymore. The next evening, as they prepared for Charlotte's visit, Lucas caught himself watching Keisha in the kitchen, humming as she cooked, looking so natural in his home. The lines were definitely blurring, and he wasn't sure if that was good for their arrangement or dangerous for his heart. But those were thoughts for another time. Tonight, they had their first test as a couple. Tomorrow, they would start preparing for the bigger challenge, convincing Maxwell Grant that their love was real. And somewhere between the acts and the truths, between the business arrangement and the genuine moments, something was changing. Something neither of them had bargained for when they signed their carefully worded contract. The arrangement was in place, but the heart, as they would both learn, rarely follows business plans. The Grant family estate loomed before them, a sprawling Georgian mansion set against the backdrop of manicured gardens and old-money sophistication. Keisha sat in the passenger seat of Lucas's Mercedes, her fingers nervously smoothing the silk of her emerald green dress, a choice they'd carefully made together for this crucial evening. "Remember to breathe," Lucas said softly, noticing her tension as he pulled up to the circular driveway. "Easy for you to say," Keisha muttered. "This is your natural habitat." Lucas couldn't help but smile at her description. Nothing natural about it. Trust me. The dinner with Charlotte had gone surprisingly well. Lucas's sister had taken to Keisha immediately, enchanted by her genuine warmth and quick wit. But Charlotte was the easy part. Tonight they faced Maxwell Grant, along with Lucas's mother, Victoria, and various other family members who'd been invited to meet the future Mrs. Grant. A butler opened the car door before Lucas could round the vehicle to do it himself. Keisha stepped out gracefully. They'd practiced this, along with 100 other society protocols. Her hand found his automatically as they approached the entrance, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease. "Ready?" he whispered. "No," she replied honestly, then plastered on her most charming smile as the front door opened. Victoria Grant was everything Keisha had imagined from Lucas's descriptions. Elegant, poised, and radiating the kind of old-world grace that couldn't be bought. She embraced Lucas warmly before turning to Keisha. "So, this is the young woman who's finally captured my son's heart," Victoria said, her assessment keen but not unkind. "Mrs. Grant," Keisha stepped forward with perfect poise. "Thank you for having us." "Victoria, please," Lucas's mother insisted, taking Keisha's arm. "Come. Everyone's dying to meet you." The next hour was a carefully choreographed dance of introductions and small talk. Keisha navigated it beautifully, Lucas noted with pride. She charmed his aunts with genuine interest in their charity work, discussed current events intelligently with his uncles, and even managed to make his usually stoic cousin Edward laugh. Maxwell Grant watched it all from his position by the fireplace, saying little but observing everything. During dinner, served in the formal dining room that could easily seat 30, the questioning began in earnest. "So Keisha," Aunt Margaret began, "Lucas tells us you worked in marketing?" "Yes," Keisha replied smoothly, using the cover story they'd prepared. "Though I recently decided to focus on consulting work. It allows me more flexibility to support Lucas's endeavors." "How modern," Victoria commented approvingly. "A woman who can balance career and family obligations." "Speaking of family," Maxwell spoke for the first time since dinner began. "Have you two discussed children?" Lucas nearly choked on his wine. They hadn't prepared for this question, but Keisha didn't miss a beat. "We both want children," she said, her hand finding Lucas's on the table. "But we agree that we want to enjoy some time as a married couple first." Lucas squeezed her hand, grateful for her quick thinking. The touch lingered longer than necessary, and he found himself studying her profile in the soft dining room light. She'd worn her hair up, exposing the elegant line of her neck, and the candlelight caught the small diamond earrings he'd given her last week. For authenticity, he'd claimed. "And the wedding plans?" Charlotte chimed in, saving them from Maxwell's intense scrutiny. "Have you set a date?" "Spring," Lucas answered, remembering their rehearsed timeline. "We're thinking an intimate ceremony." "Nonsense," Victoria interjected. "A Grant wedding must be an event. We'll help with the planning, of course." Keisha's grip on Lucas's hand tightened slightly. This wasn't part of their plan. But before either could respond, Maxwell spoke again. "Why wait until spring?" he asked directly. "If you're truly committed to each other, why not marry sooner?" The challenge in his tone was clear. Lucas felt Keisha tense beside him. "Dad," he began, but Maxwell cut him off. I don't see why you have to wait so long." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. This was the moment, the real reason for tonight's performance. "Actually," Keisha said suddenly, her voice steady, "Lucas and I have been discussing that." She turned to him, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that made his heart skip. "Haven't we, darling?" Lucas caught up quickly. "Yes, we have. A fall wedding could be lovely," Victoria mused, already planning in her head. "The gardens would be beautiful with the autumn colors." Maxwell's expression remained skeptical, but Lucas could see him considering it. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of wedding discussions and family stories, with Keisha playing her part perfectly. Later, as they drove home through the dark city streets, the tension finally broke. "Children?" Lucas asked, unable to help himself. "We hadn't discussed that one. What was I supposed to say?" Keisha sighed, kicking off her heels. "No, we haven't discussed it because this whole thing is fake. You handled it well. You handled everything well." She was quiet for a moment, staring out the window. "Your father doesn't believe us." "No," Lucas agreed. "He doesn't. So what now?" Lucas pulled into the underground parking of his building. Their building now, officially. The move had happened last week, with Keisha taking the guest suite while maintaining her apartment for appearances. "Now," he said, turning off the engine, "we give him what he wants. We move up the timeline." Keisha turned to look at him, her expression unreadable in the dim light. "You want to get married sooner? It makes sense," Lucas reasoned, trying to keep his voice businesslike. "The company needs the investment, and a longer engagement only gives my father more time to doubt us." "Lucas," Keisha said softly, "are you actually proposing we move up our fake wedding while sitting in a parking garage?" He hadn't realized how it sounded until she put it that way. Wait here." He got out of the car, rounded to her side, and opened her door. Taking her hand, he helped her out, then, to her surprise, dropped to one knee. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice catching. "Doing this properly," he replied, looking up at her. The parking garage lights cast shadows across her face, but he could see the surprise in her eyes. "Keisha Brown, will you marry me? Sooner rather than later?" For a moment, she just stared at him. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a genuine, warm sound that echoed in the concrete space. "You're proposing a fake wedding with a real proposal in a parking garage," she said, shaking her head. "This is insane. Is that a yes?" She looked at him for a long moment, and something shifted in her expression. "Yes," she said finally, "but not because of your father or the company." "No?" Lucas stood, still holding her hand. "Because you got down on one knee in a parking garage in your suit," she said softly. "Because you could have just made it another business discussion, but you didn't." They stood there, hands linked, the moment feeling more real than either had expected. Lucas found himself studying her face, noticing how her eyes caught the fluorescent lights, how her lips curved slightly at the corners. The elevator ride up to the penthouse was quiet, both lost in thought. As they entered their shared space, Keisha kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. "Oh," she said suddenly, remembering something. "I got a call today. A marketing position at Reynolds and Associates. They want me to come in for an interview." Lucas felt an unexpected twinge of something. "That's great," he said carefully. "But I thought we agreed." "It's part-time," she assured him. 3 days a week, flexible hours. I can still manage all the fiancé duties." He nodded, watching her move around the kitchen, making tea, a habit he'd grown accustomed to. If that's what you want. She paused, turning to look at him. Is it okay with you? Of course, he said quickly. This arrangement shouldn't stop you from pursuing your career. Right, she agreed. The arrangement. But something had changed tonight. Maybe it was the way she'd handled his family, or how naturally their hands found each other's, or that moment in the parking garage that had felt more real than fake. Keisha, he started, not sure what he wanted to say. I should get some sleep. She cut him off, her voice slightly too bright. Big day tomorrow, planning a wedding and all. She disappeared into her suite, leaving Lucas standing in the kitchen, staring at her abandoned tea mug. The lines they'd so carefully drawn were blurring more each day. The arrangement was becoming something else, something neither of them had planned for. In her room, Keisha leaned against the closed door, her heart racing. She'd agreed to move up the wedding, but not for the reasons Lucas thought. Not for his father's approval or the company's stability. She'd agreed because for a moment in that parking garage, looking down at him on one knee, she'd forgotten it was all pretend. And that, she realized with a sinking heart, was the most dangerous thing of all. Tomorrow they would start planning a wedding that wasn't real. They would continue playing their parts, maintaining their carefully constructed facade. But tonight, in the quiet of their separate rooms, both Lucas and Keisha lay awake, wondering if maybe, just maybe, not everything about their arrangement was as fake as they'd planned. The next 6 weeks passed in a whirlwind of wedding preparations. Victoria Grant had taken charge, transforming what was supposed to be a simple ceremony into what society magazines were already calling the wedding of the year. Keisha found herself swept up in a parade of dress fittings, flower selections, and endless decisions about things she'd never considered important before. Ivory or cream for the table linens? Victoria asked one afternoon, spreading swatches across the massive dining table in the Grant estate. Is there a difference? Keisha whispered to Lucas, who had been dragged along for this particular decision. He squeezed her hand under the table, a gesture that had become increasingly natural between them. Just pick one. She'll change it anyway. Cream, Keisha decided confidently, earning an approving nod from Victoria. Later, as they drove home, Keisha slumped in her seat. How do people do this for real? All this pressure, all these expectations. Lucas glanced at her, noting the exhaustion in her voice. We can still slow this down. No, she straightened up. Your father's already suspicious. We stick to the plan. The plan. Sometimes Lucas forgot there was a plan, especially in moments like these. Just the two of them, comfortable in each other's presence, discussing their day like any real couple. The dress fitting was a private affair, with only Charlotte and Trisha present. Keisha had insisted on including her best friend in the wedding preparations, and to everyone's surprise, Charlotte and Trisha had bonded immediately over their shared love of cooking. You look. Trisha trailed off, tears in her eyes as Keisha emerged in the fitted lace gown. Like a bride, Charlotte finished, adjusting the train. Keisha stared at her reflection, hardly recognizing herself. The dress was perfect, elegant without being ostentatious, modern yet timeless. For a moment, she allowed herself to forget this was all for show. Lucas won't know what hit him, Charlotte declared. Keisha's heart skipped at the mention of his name. Lately, she'd found herself thinking about him in ways that weren't part of their arrangement, noticing how his eyes crinkled when he really smiled, how he always knew when she needed coffee without asking, how safe she felt when he took her hand. Stop it, she whispered to herself in the mirror. What? Trisha asked. Nothing. Keisha forced a smile. Just wedding jitters. The night before the wedding, Lucas and Keisha sat on the balcony of their penthouse, sharing a bottle of wine. Tomorrow, they would be married. Legally. Binding. Real on paper, if nothing else. We should discuss ground rules, Lucas said suddenly. For after. Keisha took a long sip of wine. Right. Rules. We'll be living together properly then. No more maintaining separate apartments. I know. And we'll have to be more convincing. Keisha turned to look at him. More than holding hands and the occasional public kiss. Lucas shifted uncomfortably. My father will expect us to act like newlyweds. And how do newlyweds act, Lucas? She challenged, the wine making her bolder than usual. He met her gaze, and something electric passed between them. Like they can't keep their hands off each other, he said softly. Keisha's breath caught. We should practice then, she heard herself say. Later, neither would be sure who moved first. One moment, they were discussing rules. The next, his lips were on hers, soft and tentative at first. Then, with growing intensity. It wasn't their first kiss. They'd shared carefully choreographed public displays of affection before. But this was different. This was private, unplanned, real. Lucas pulled away first, his breathing uneven. That was practice, Keisha said quickly, standing up. For tomorrow. Before he could say another word, she fled to her room, leaving Lucas alone with the wine and the lingering taste of her on his lips. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect. The Grant estate had been transformed into a fairy tale setting, with thousands of white roses and crystal decorations catching the autumn sunlight. In the bridal suite, Keisha tried to calm her racing heart as the makeup artist put the finishing touches on her look. You okay? Trisha asked, adjusting her maid of honor dress. Fine, Keisha lied. Just nervous. About the wedding or about what comes after? Keisha met her friend's knowing gaze in the mirror. Both, she admitted. The ceremony itself was a blur of emotions and perfectly executed moments. Keisha walked down the aisle on her uncle's arm. Her father had passed away years ago, her eyes fixed on Lucas waiting at the altar. He looked devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, but it was his expression that caught her breath. He was looking at her like she was the only person in the world. Their vows were traditional, chosen carefully to avoid any personalization that might reveal their arrangement. But when Lucas slipped the ring on her finger, his hands trembling slightly, Keisha felt her heart constrict. I do, she said clearly, meaning it more than she should. I do, he echoed, his eyes never leaving hers. The kiss was perfect, passionate enough to please the crowd, controlled enough to maintain their dignity. But Keisha felt it down to her toes. And from the way Lucas's hand tightened on her waist, she knew he felt it too. The reception was a grand affair, with hundreds of guests, endless champagne, and a 5-course meal that would have impressed even the pickiest food critic. They danced their first dance to At Last, Victoria's Choice, and Keisha tried not to think about how right it felt in Lucas's arms. You're a wonderful dancer, she commented, as he led her around the floor. Years of lessons, he replied with a small smile. Mother's insistence. Lucky me, she murmured, then caught herself. This wasn't real. She needed to remember that. Later, as they cut the cake and fed each other pieces neatly, as practiced, Maxwell Grant approached them. Congratulations, Lucas, he said, his expression unreadable. I'm glad to have you join our family, Mrs. Keisha Grant. Lucas's arm tightened around Keisha's waist. Charlotte's voice called out, There you are. It's time for the bouquet toss. They returned to the reception, maintaining their perfect facade. But something had shifted. The 2-year clause hung over them like a shadow, making every touch, every smile, every moment feel more precious and more painful. That night, in the honeymoon suite of the city's most exclusive hotel, they stood awkwardly on opposite sides of the massive room. I'll take the sofa, Lucas offered. Don't be ridiculous, Keisha said, pulling pajamas from her overnight bag. The bed is big enough for both of us. We're adults. We can handle this." But as they lay in the dark, carefully maintaining space between them, both were acutely aware of every breath, every slight movement. The 2-year countdown had started, ticking away in both their minds. "Lucas?" Keisha whispered into the darkness. "Yes?" "What happens if we break the 2-year clause?" He was quiet for a long moment. "The investment gets pulled. The company would likely fail. And if we make it past 2 years, then everything I've worked for is secure." She rolled over, studying his profile in the dim light. "And us? What happens to us?" Lucas turned to face her, their faces inches apart. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether this is still just an arrangement," he said softly, "or if it's becoming something else." Keisha's heart raced, but before she could respond, Lucas's phone buzzed, a congratulatory text from Mike about the company's stock already rising on news of the marriage. Reality crashed back in. This was business. It had always been business. Anything else was just complications. "Good night, Lucas," she said, rolling away from him. "Good night, Mrs. Grant." The title sent a shiver down her spine. Mrs. Grant. For 2 years, she would be Mrs. Grant. 2 years to pretend, to play house, to ignore the growing feelings that threatened to destroy their carefully constructed arrangement. 2 years that had already begun to feel both too long and not long enough. The morning after their wedding night felt surreal. Keisha woke first, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar weight of her wedding ring and the sound of Lucas's steady breathing beside her. They'd maintained their careful distance throughout the night, but somehow, her hand had ended up mere inches from his. They'd agreed to skip the traditional honeymoon. Lucas had too many pressing business matters, and honestly, neither was sure they could maintain their facade 24/7 for 2 weeks in paradise. Instead, they were moving directly into their new routine as husband and wife. The first week was a study in awkward choreography. They'd lived together before the wedding, but this was different. Now, there was no separate apartment to retreat to, no buffer zone between their pretense and reality. "Sorry," Keisha yelped one morning, nearly colliding with Lucas as they both reached for the coffee maker. She was still in her silk pajamas, hair tousled from sleep, while he was already dressed for the office in an impeccably tailored suit. "You go first," he offered, stepping back. But the kitchen was narrow, and the movement brought him against the counter, trapping him there as she reached past him for a mug. For a moment, they were close enough that he could smell her lavender shampoo, could see the slight flush creeping up her neck. "Thanks," she mumbled, retreating quickly with her coffee. These moments happened dozens of times a day, small, domestic collisions that left them both flustered and hyper-aware of each other's presence. They needed rules, Keisha decided. Boundaries. A schedule. "We should make a household routine," she announced that evening, armed with a notepad and determination. Lucas looked up from his laptop, amused. "A routine? Yes. Who uses the bathroom when? Who cooks which meals? Who handles what chores? Like real couples do. Real couples don't usually need to write it down," he pointed out. "Well, we're not," she trailed off, the words "real couple" hanging unspoken between them. But they did create a routine, and slowly, awkwardly, it began to work. Lucas would wake first, go for his morning run, and shower before Keisha emerged for her coffee. She would handle breakfast, usually something simple like toast or yogurt, while he caught up on early morning emails. They'd leave for their respective days, Lucas to his office, Keisha to her new part-time position at Reynolds and Associates. Evenings were trickier. They needed to be seen together regularly, maintaining their newlywed image, but they also craved private time. They settled into a rhythm of 3 date nights a week, at various visible locations, and the other evenings at home. The first time Keisha attempted to cook a proper dinner was a disaster that nearly set off the smoke alarm. "I thought you said you could cook," Lucas coughed, fanning smoke away from the burned attempt at chicken marsala. "I can," she protested. "Just not fancy things. My mom taught me soul food and basics." Lucas looked at her frustrated expression and did something unexpected. He laughed. Not his polite society laugh, but a real, deep belly laugh that transformed his entire face. "Order pizza?" he suggested, still chuckling. "Pizza sounds perfect," she agreed, relieved. They ended up on the living room floor, pizza box between them, trading stories about cooking disasters. Lucas admitted to once trying to impress a college girlfriend by cooking pasta without water. "How was I supposed to know it wouldn't just cook?" Keisha countered with her first attempt at Thanksgiving turkey, which her family still referred to as the Great Poultry Incident of 2019. It became their thing, cooking together, or at least attempting to. Keisha taught Lucas the basics her mother had drilled into her: how to chop vegetables properly, the importance of seasoning, the secret to perfect mac and cheese. In return, he shared the few dishes he'd mastered over the years, mostly simple Italian recipes learned from his grandmother. "The key," he explained one evening, guiding her hands as she kneaded pasta dough, "is to feel it. When it's right, you'll know." His hands were warm over hers, and Keisha found herself focusing more on that sensation than the dough beneath them. These moments were dangerous, too intimate, too real. Movie nights became another routine, usually on Wednesdays when they both needed a midweek break. They discovered their tastes were surprisingly complementary. She loved classic films. He preferred modern thrillers, but both enjoyed good storytelling. "No, no, no," Keisha groaned one night, throwing popcorn at the screen. "Don't go in the basement. It's a horror movie," Lucas pointed out, amused. "They always go in the basement. Because they're idiots." She unconsciously curled closer to him on the couch, pulling the throw blanket they shared up to her chin. Lucas found himself watching her more than the movie, fascinated by her running commentary and expressive reactions. When had this become so comfortable? The comfort was the most dangerous part. It crept up on them slowly, in small moments they couldn't guard against. Like how Lucas learned to tell Keisha's moods by her coffee choices: espresso for stress, latte for contemplation, plain black for serious workdays. Or how Keisha automatically started buying the apple juice Lucas preferred, even though she thought it was too sweet. Their closet space merged gradually, her dresses hanging next to his suits, their shoes mingling on the rack. The bathroom counter became a landscape of their combined toiletries, her facial creams beside his aftershave, their toothbrushes sharing a holder. "We should probably keep some things separate," Keisha suggested half-heartedly one evening, watching Lucas absent-mindedly use her hand lotion. "Probably," he agreed, but neither made any move to change their increasingly intertwined lives. The physical boundaries began to blur too. It started with casual touches, a hand on the small of her back as they passed in the hallway, his shoulder brushing hers as they did dishes side by side. The wedding rings that had felt so foreign at first became natural, and sometimes they forgot they were just props in their elaborate performance. One Sunday morning, about 2 months into their marriage, Keisha came out to find Lucas attempting to make pancakes. The kitchen was a disaster zone of flour and spilled milk. "What are you doing?" she asked, trying not to laugh. "I thought, you always make breakfast, and you had a late night with that work project. So," he gestured helplessly at the mess. Something warm bloomed in Keisha's chest. "Here," she said softly, moving beside him. "Let me show you how." They worked together, his arms around her, as she demonstrated the proper batter consistency, her body fitting perfectly against his chest. When the first perfect pancake emerged golden brown, His triumphant smile made her heart skip. "We make a good team," he said, and for a moment, neither was sure if he meant just in the kitchen. Their friends and family commented on how natural they seemed together. "You two just fit," Charlotte declared, during one of her frequent dinner visits. If only she knew, Keisha thought. But did she? These days, she wasn't sure where the act ended and reality began. Their domestic life settled into something that looked remarkably like real marriage: shared meals, inside jokes, synchronized schedules. They learned each other's quirks and habits. Lucas's tendency to leave half-full coffee cups around the house, Keisha's habit of singing in the shower, his preference for the left side of the bed, her collection of true crime podcasts that played while she cooked. But underneath the comfortable routine lay the ticking clock of their arrangement. Every domestic moment, every shared laugh, every casual touch was numbered. They had created a home together, but it was built on a foundation of sand, set to wash away when their 2 years were up. Or was it? Sometimes, in quiet moments when they forgot to maintain their distance, when their practiced performance felt too real to be fake, both wondered if they were building something more permanent than either had planned. The question hung unspoken in their shared spaces, in their synchronized movements, in their growing comfort with each other. Could you fake your way into something real? And if you did, how would you know where the pretense ended and the truth began? For now, they continued their domestic dance, each day adding another layer to their complicated relationship, each moment making it harder to remember this was all supposed to be temporary. The board meeting was running late, and Keisha found herself stealing glances at Lucas more often than she should. She was there in her official capacity as the marketing consultant for Reynolds Associates, presenting a potential collaboration between their firms, but she couldn't help noticing how commanding he looked at the head of the table. "Mrs. Grant's proposal offers significant advantages," Lucas was saying, his voice professional and detached. "The synergy between our companies could open new markets." Mrs. Grant. He always called her that in professional settings, and it still sent an unexpected thrill through her. "Stop it," she chided herself, focusing on her presentation materials. The collaboration had been her idea, born during one of their evening discussions about work. Lucas had mentioned his company's struggle to reach younger demographics, and Keisha had immediately seen the potential connection with Reynolds's innovative marketing strategies. "Brilliant work," James Reynolds, her boss, whispered as she concluded her presentation. His hand touched her arm briefly in congratulation, and Keisha noticed Lucas's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. After the meeting, as the board members filed out, Lucas remained seated, reviewing the proposal documents with unusual intensity. "Everything okay?" Keisha asked, gathering her materials. "Fine," he replied shortly, "though I noticed Reynolds seems quite appreciative of your work." Keisha paused, studying him. "That's generally considered a good thing in business." "Of course," Lucas agreed, still not looking up. "I just hope he remembers you're married." The words hung in the air between them. Keisha felt her heart rate increase. "Are you jealous?" That made him look up. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm simply concerned about maintaining our image." "Right," she said slowly. "Our image," but something had shifted, and they both felt it. The following week, Lucas came down with a severe flu. He tried to hide it at first, pushing through meetings and conference calls with increasingly obvious symptoms until Keisha finally put her foot down. "You're going to bed," she declared, taking his phone away. "Now, I have a merger call," he protested weakly, his voice hoarse. "You have a fever of 102, she countered. "The merger can wait." To her surprise, he didn't argue further, allowing her to guide him to their bedroom. She helped him change into pajamas, trying to ignore the intimacy of the moment as her fingers brushed against his heated skin. "Stay?" he asked as she turned to leave, his usual composure stripped away by fever and exhaustion. Keisha hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. "Just until you fall asleep." She found herself absent-mindedly running her fingers through his hair as his breathing evened out. When had this become so natural? When had caring for him stopped feeling like part of their arrangement? The next few days fell into a rhythm of medication schedules, soup preparation, and gentle caretaking. Keisha worked from home, setting up her laptop in their bedroom so she could monitor his condition. "You don't have to do all this," Lucas said, during a lucid moment, watching her prepare fresh ginger tea. "That's what wives are for," she replied lightly, but the words felt heavy with meaning. In his fever-weakened state, Lucas was different, more vulnerable, more open. He talked about his childhood, his fears about the company, his complicated relationship with his father. Keisha found herself sharing too, stories about her mother, her dreams beyond marketing, her secret desire to write children's books. "You'd be good at that," he murmured sleepily one evening. "You're good at everything." She blamed his fever for the comment, just as she blamed her racing heart on concern for his health. As Lucas recovered, their public appearances resumed. The collaboration between their companies had generated media interest, and they found themselves attending more events together than ever. At a charity gala, Keisha wore a deep blue gown that made Lucas forget his practiced society smile for a moment when he saw her. She pretended not to notice how his hand lingered on her back as they posed for photographers, just as he pretended not to notice how she leaned into his touch. "The Grants make such a striking couple," they overheard one socialite comment. "So in love." The words should have made them proud. Their act was working perfectly. Instead, they created a strange tension between them. That tension exploded unexpectedly at a business dinner when one of Lucas's former flames approached their table. "Lucas, darling," the woman purred, ignoring Keisha completely. "You're looking wonderful. Marriage clearly agrees with you." "Thank you, Rebecca," Lucas replied politely, his hand finding Keisha's under the table. "Have you met my wife?" The interaction was brief and perfectly proper, but Keisha found herself unable to focus on the rest of the dinner. The way Rebecca had looked at Lucas, with such familiar appreciation. "She's just an old friend," Lucas said later as they drove home. "I didn't ask," Keisha replied, staring out the window. "You didn't have to. You've barely spoken since she left." "I'm tired," she lied. "It's been a long day." Lucas pulled into their parking garage but didn't turn off the car immediately. "Are you jealous?" She turned to him sharply, hearing her own words from weeks ago echoed back. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm simply concerned about maintaining our image." The silence that followed was deafening. These moments of tension, of unacknowledged feelings, began occurring more frequently. They manifested in small ways. Keisha lingering too long over straightening Lucas's tie before work. Lucas's eyes following her movements across rooms, their hands finding each other without conscious thought. During a weekend brunch with Charlotte and her new husband, Keisha found herself telling stories about Lucas's quirks, his inability to properly load a dishwasher, his secret addiction to reality TV cooking shows, the way he hummed while reading financial reports. "You two are adorable," Charlotte declared. "I wasn't sure at first, but you're perfect together." Keisha felt Lucas stiffen beside her. They'd gotten too comfortable, let their act become too real. The lines were blurring dangerously. That night, as they prepared for bed in their now familiar routine, Lucas broke their unspoken rule about discussing their arrangement. "We need to be careful," he said, watching her remove her jewelry. "We're getting—" "What?" she challenged when he didn't continue. "Too convincing." Keisha met his eyes in the mirror. "Isn't that the point?" "You know what I mean." She did know. They were no longer just playing parts. They were living them, feeling them, becoming them. "It's fine," she said, more to herself than him. "We're both adults. We can handle this." But could they? When had Lucas's smile become something she looked forward to rather than something she performed for? When had their good morning kisses, performed for the security cameras in their building's lobby, started lingering longer than necessary? The collaboration between their companies was thriving, forcing them to spend more time together professionally. Keisha found herself both dreading and anticipating their meetings, where they had to maintain professional distance while their personal lives were so intertwined. "The market response has been exceptional," Lucas reported during one session. "Mrs. Grant's strategy has exceeded expectations." "Keisha," she corrected without thinking. "You can call me Keisha here." His eyes met hers across the conference table. "Can I?" The question seemed to ask more than just about her name. Their evenings at home became charged with unspoken tension. They still maintained their routines, cooking together, watching movies, sharing their days, but each interaction felt weighted with possibility. During one movie night, Keisha fell asleep on Lucas's shoulder. He sat perfectly still, watching her breathe, fighting the urge to press a kiss to her temple. When she woke, neither mentioned it, but both remembered. "This is just an arrangement," Keisha reminded herself daily, usually while watching Lucas make coffee in the morning, his hair still mussed from sleep. "Just business." But business didn't explain why her heart raced when he smiled at her. Business didn't justify the way she missed him on his business trips, or how he called her every night when he was away, long after they'd discussed anything work-related. The denial became a dance they performed daily. They attributed their increasing physical closeness to maintaining their cover, their intimate knowledge of each other's lives to thorough preparation, their lingering looks to committed acting. "You're very good at this," Lucas commented one evening after a particularly successful dinner party. "At what?" Keisha asked, helping him clean up, playing the perfect wife. She paused, wineglass in hand. "You're very good at playing the perfect husband." They stood in their kitchen, the words "playing" and "perfect" hanging between them like a challenge. For a moment, Keisha thought Lucas might say something more, might finally acknowledge the growing tension between them. Instead, he turned away. "We should get some sleep. Early meeting tomorrow." But sleep didn't come easily to either of them anymore. They lay in their shared bed, maintaining their careful distance, each acutely aware of the other's presence and the feelings they weren't supposed to be developing. The 2-year clock continued ticking, but somehow, the deadline that had once seemed like an end point now loomed like a threat. Neither wanted to examine why the thought of their arrangement ending had become so painful. "It's just business," they told themselves and each other, even as their hearts wrote a different story with every shared smile, every casual touch, every moment of genuine connection. But business had never felt like this. James Reynolds's increasing presence in their lives began as a simple professional matter. The collaboration between their companies was thriving, requiring more frequent meetings and strategic planning sessions. But something in the way he looked at Keisha made Lucas's jaw clench every time. "We should discuss the youth market expansion over dinner," James suggested one afternoon, leaning casually against Keisha's desk. "I know this excellent Italian place." "Actually," Lucas interrupted, appearing seemingly out of nowhere, "Keisha and I have dinner plans tonight. Perhaps a lunch meeting tomorrow would be more appropriate." The tension in the room was palpable. James straightened, his easy smile never wavering. "Of course. My apologies, Mrs. Grant." Later that evening, in their penthouse, Keisha confronted Lucas. "We didn't have dinner plans." "We do now," he replied, loosening his tie with more force than necessary. "I thought we could try that new tie place you mentioned." "Lucas," she said softly, "are you going to tell me what that was really about?" He busied himself with his cufflinks, avoiding her gaze. "James Reynolds has a reputation with his female employees. I'm simply maintaining our image." "Our image," Keisha repeated, the words tasting bitter. "Or are you actually jealous?" "Don't be ridiculous," he snapped, but his eyes betrayed him when they finally met hers. The situation wasn't helped by the fact that James seemed to appear everywhere. Charity events, business functions, even their favorite coffee shop one Sunday morning. Each time, his attention to Keisha was perfectly professional yet undeniably personal. "You know," James commented during one meeting, "your marketing insights are wasted on just this collaboration. We should discuss a more permanent position at Reynolds and Associates." Lucas's pen snapped in his hand, ink staining his fingers. The dynamics of their friend group were shifting too. Mike and Trisha had begun dating after meeting at the wedding, their relationship developing into something genuine and uncomplicated, everything that Lucas and Keisha's wasn't supposed to be. "You two inspired us," Trisha declared during a double date night. "Seeing how perfect you are together made me realize what I wanted." Mike pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "When you know, right?" Lucas and Keisha exchanged glances, the weight of their deception heavy between them. That night, back at their place, Keisha whispered, "They make it look so easy." "What?" "Being in love." Lucas was quiet for so long she thought he'd fallen asleep. Then, "Maybe it is easy when it's real." The words hung in the darkness, loaded with unspoken meaning. Family visits complicated matters further. Victoria Grant had taken to dropping by unannounced, usually armed with interior design suggestions and probing questions about grandchildren. "The biological clock waits for no one," she reminded them during one such visit, eyeing Keisha's flat stomach meaningfully. "Mother," Lucas warned, but Keisha had already fled to the kitchen, claiming she needed to check on dinner. He found her there, gripping the counter edge, her knuckles white. "I'm sorry about her." "It's fine," Keisha said, but her voice shook slightly. Lucas moved behind her, his hands covering hers on the counter. They stood like that, barely breathing, until Victoria's voice called from the living room, shattering the moment. The shared room incident happened on a rainy Tuesday. A pipe burst in their building, forcing several residents to evacuate their apartments. The Grants, being on the top floor, offered their spare rooms to affected neighbors. "Mrs. Lee from 1502 can take the guest room," Keisha organized, "and the Patels from 1503 can use the office sofa bed." "Where will you sleep?" Lucas asked. They had maintained separate bedrooms despite sharing the master bed, keeping up appearances with Victoria's frequent visits. "I'll take the couch." "Don't be ridiculous," he said. "We'll share my room. We're married, remember?" But sharing a room, truly sharing one, with nowhere else to retreat to, was different than their careful bedroom arrangement. Keisha's clothes hung beside his, her perfume mingled with his aftershave, her books piled on what became her nightstand. The intimacy was overwhelming. Lucas found himself cataloging her nighttime routine, the way she braided her hair before bed, how she always read a few pages of whatever novel she was currently devouring, the lavender hand cream she smoothed over her skin. One night, half asleep, she curled into him, seeking warmth. Lucas froze, his heart thundering. She fit perfectly against him, her head tucking under his chin as if they'd done this 1,000 times. "Keisha," he whispered, but she was already asleep. He lay awake for hours, memorizing the feel of her in his arms, knowing he should move away but unable to make himself do it. When James called the next day to invite Keisha to a strictly professional dinner meeting, Lucas nearly threw his phone across the room. "You can't go," he said before he could stop himself. Keisha raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? It's not appropriate. Not appropriate for a married woman to have dinner with her boss. Not appropriate for my wife to have dinner with a man who's clearly interested in her." The words echoed in their kitchen. Keisha's eyes widened. "Your wife?" Lucas ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. "You know what I mean." "Do I?" she challenged, stepping closer. "Because lately, I'm not sure either of us knows what we mean anymore." The tension between them was electric. For a moment, Lucas thought he might close the distance, might finally acknowledge the feelings that had been building for months. Instead, his phone rang. Mike, calling about a business emergency. The moment shattered. "I should get that," Lucas said, stepping back. "You should," Keisha agreed, her voice carefully neutral. That evening, she went to dinner with James. Lucas spent hours in his home office, pretending to work while actually tracking time until he heard her key in the door. She found him there, still in his suit, pretending to read reports. "How was dinner?" he asked, aiming for casual and missing by miles. "Professional," she replied, as promised. The relief that flooded through him was immediate and uncomfortable. He had no right to feel this way, no right to care who she had dinner with. Their arrangement was business, nothing more. But watching her get ready for bed that night, back in their temporarily shared space, Lucas knew he was lying to himself. This had stopped being just business somewhere between fake smiles and real laughter, between practiced touches and genuine care. The complications weren't James, or Mike and Trisha's relationship, or even the family visits. The real complication was how easy it had become to forget they were pretending, how natural it felt to act like a real couple, how much it hurt to remember they weren't. As they lay in bed that night, maintaining their careful distance despite the lingering intimacy of their temporary room-sharing arrangement, both were acutely aware of the growing truth they couldn't acknowledge. The most dangerous complication was falling in love when you're only supposed to be acting. The email arrived on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning. Keisha was at her desk at Reynolds & Associates, reviewing campaign metrics when her computer chimed. The subject line read, "Exciting Opportunity, London Division." Her heart started racing as she read through the details. Reynolds & Associates was expanding their European operations, and James wanted her to head the marketing department in London. The position came with a substantial salary increase, a signing bonus, and the kind of career advancement she'd always dreamed about. It was perfect. It was impossible. She stared at the screen until the words blurred, her wedding ring catching the fluorescent office light. How could she even consider this? She was married, legally, bindingly married for at least almost a year. "Have you read it?" James appeared at her office door, his expression eager. Yes, she managed. "It's incredible, but before you say anything," he interrupted, stepping inside and closing the door. "I know it's complicated. You're married, but Lucas Grant is a businessman. Surely he'd understand this kind of opportunity." Keisha's fingers instinctively touched her ring. "It's not that simple, isn't it?" James leaned against her desk, too close for comfort. "Modern marriages handle long distance all the time. Unless there's another reason you can't leave?" Something in his tone made her look up sharply. Did he suspect? But his face showed only friendly concern. "I need time to think about it," she said finally. "To discuss it with Lucas." "Of course," James smiled. "The position's yours if you want it. But I need an answer by the end of the month." That gave her 2 weeks. 2 weeks to make a decision that could change everything. She spent the rest of the day in a daze, the email burning a hole in her consciousness. How would she tell Lucas? Should she tell him at all? It wasn't like their marriage was real, except it had started feeling real somewhere along the way. Lucas was already home when she arrived that evening, unusual for him. He was in the kitchen, attempting to cook what looked like pasta. "Early day?" she asked, dropping her bag and kicking off her heels. "Thought I'd surprise you," he said, then really looked at her. "What's wrong?" Of course he could tell. When had he learned to read her so well? "I got an offer today," she began, watching his face carefully. "From Reynolds and Associates. A promotion?" He smiled, genuinely pleased for her. "That's wonderful. In London." The wooden spoon he was holding clattered against the pot. "London? They want me to head their European marketing division," she explained, the words tumbling out. "It's an amazing opportunity, great salary, everything I've worked for. But," he prompted when she trailed off, "but I'm married to you," she said softly. Lucas turned back to the stove, his shoulders tense. "It's not a real marriage." The words hurt more than they should have. "No," she agreed, "but we have an arrangement. The 2-year clause with your father. I'll handle my father," he cut in, his voice tight. "If this is what you want." "Is it what you want?" He finally turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "What I want doesn't matter. This is business, remember?" The pasta began to boil over, but neither moved to fix it. News of the offer spread quickly through their social circle. Mike was the first to call. "London?" he exclaimed. "What does Lucas think about this?" "He's supportive," Keisha said, the word tasting false. "Really?" "Because he's been in the worst mood of late." That was true. In the days following her announcement, Lucas had thrown himself into work, coming home late and leaving early. They still maintained appearances in public, but at home, the tension was unbearable. Their friends' reactions varied. Tricia was excited for her but concerned about the distance. "Long distance is hard," she said, speaking from her newfound relationship wisdom with Mike. "Are you sure about this?" Charlotte was more direct. "Are you running away from something or someone?" "It's a career opportunity," Keisha insisted. But late at night, lying in their bed with Lucas maintaining careful inches between them, she wondered if Charlotte was right. James, meanwhile, was being perfectly professional yet persistently present. He included Lucas in all discussions about the transfer, scheduled meetings at convenient times, handled all the paperwork efficiently. He was making it impossible to find fault with the offer or his handling of it. "The London office is excited to have you," he mentioned during one meeting. "They've already started preparing your workspace." Lucas, who had insisted on attending these meetings, gripped his pen tighter. "Isn't that presumptuous? She hasn't accepted yet." "Just being prepared," James smiled. "We want to make the transition as smooth as possible, for everyone." The emphasis on everyone wasn't subtle. The situation came to a head at the going-away party Reynolds and Associates threw for another transferring employee. Keisha attended with Lucas, maintaining their perfect couple facade. But watching the celebratory speeches about new beginnings and exciting opportunities, she felt her resolve cracking. "Dance with me," Lucas said suddenly, holding out his hand as the music shifted to something slow. On the dance floor, he held her closer than usual, their practiced movements feeling anything but practiced. "Remember our wedding dance?" she asked, trying to lighten the mood. "I remember everything," he said quietly. "Every dance, every dinner, every moment." Keisha's heart clenched. "Lucas, don't," he cut her off. "Don't say anything you don't mean." "How do you know what I mean?" she challenged, pulling back slightly to look at him. "You won't even talk to me about this." "What's there to talk about? It's a great opportunity. You should take it." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I can give." James chose that moment to approach them. "Mind if I cut in?" Lucas's arm tightened around her waist for a fraction of a second before he stepped back. "Of course not. I need to make some calls anyway." Keisha watched him leave, her heart heavy as James took his place. "He's not taking it well," James observed. "It's complicated, is it? Sometimes I wonder." He spun her gently, then continued, "If your marriage is as perfect as it appears." Keisha missed a step. "What do you mean?" "Just that marriages usually aren't built on such shaky foundations." Her blood ran cold. "I don't know what you're talking about, don't you?" James's smile was knowing. "The timing of your wedding, the sudden merger, the convenient combining of assets. It wasn't hard to figure out." Keisha pulled away from him. "You don't know anything about my marriage." "I know enough," he said softly. "Enough to know you deserve better than a business arrangement." She fled the dance floor, her mind racing. If James had figured it out, who else had? And more importantly, why did his words hurt so much less than Lucas's insistence that their marriage wasn't real? She found Lucas in his office, staring out the window. "We need to talk," she said, closing the door behind her. "About what? Your exciting new life in London?" His voice was bitter. "About us. About what's really going on here." He turned to face her. "Nothing's going on here. This is exactly what we agreed to. A business arrangement that benefits both of us." "Is that all this is to you?" she demanded. "Business? Isn't that all it's supposed to be?" They stared at each other, the air heavy with unspoken words and unfulfilled possibilities. "James knows," she finally said, "about the arrangement." Lucas's expression darkened. "Of course he does. That's why he offered you London." "What's that supposed to mean?" "He's trying to break up our marriage, Keisha. He's been trying since day one. Maybe he's just offering me a good opportunity. Or maybe he's taking advantage of our situation." "Our situation?" She laughed humorlessly. "You mean our fake marriage? Our business arrangement? Why do you care if he breaks that up?" "Because..." Lucas stopped himself, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "Because what?" But Lucas's phone rang, his father's ringtone. The moment shattered like glass. "You should take the job," he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. "It's what you've always wanted." "Is it?" she whispered, but he was already answering his phone, effectively ending the conversation. Keisha left his office, her head spinning. The London offer lay on her desk like a lifeline or a death sentence. She wasn't sure which. 2 weeks to decide. 2 weeks to choose between her career dreams and... what? A fake marriage? A real love? The lines had blurred so completely she couldn't tell anymore. As she sat at her desk, staring at the offer letter, she realized the real question wasn't whether to go to London. The real question was whether what she felt for Lucas was really worth it, and whether what he felt for her was real at all. The decision deadline loomed like a storm cloud. 1 week left, and the tension in the Grant penthouse had reached unbearable levels. Lucas and Keisha maintained their public appearances flawlessly, but at home, they barely spoke, dancing around each other in a painful choreography of avoidance. It was a rainy Thursday evening when everything finally imploded. Keisha had stayed late at the office, finalizing details for what might be her last project in New York. The parking garage was nearly empty when she heard footsteps behind her. "You can't go to London." She turned to find Lucas standing there, soaked from the rain, looking more disheveled than she'd ever seen him. "Have you been waiting for me?" "Yeah, about an hour," he admitted. "Your assistant said you were working late." Keisha's heart thundered in her chest. "Lucas, please." He stepped closer, water dripping from his usually perfect hair. "Don't go." "Why?" she challenged, her voice echoing in the concrete structure. "Give me one real reason to stay." "The company." "No," she cut him off. "Not business. Not our arrangement. Not your father's conditions. A real reason." Lucas ran a hand through his wet hair, frustration evident in every movement. "You know why?" "No." She stood her ground. "I don't know. Because you won't tell me. You won't even talk to me." "Because I can't," he exploded. "I can't talk about it because if I start, I'll have to admit that somewhere between fake smiles and real laughter, between practiced touches and genuine care, I fell in love with my wife." The confession hung in the air between them, as heavy as the rain outside. "Your wife," Keisha repeated softly. Or me? Lucas moved closer, close enough that she could see the water droplets on his eyelashes. Both. Everything you are. The way you laugh at bad movies, how you can't cook fancy food but make the best mac and cheese I've ever tasted, how you scrunch your nose when you're concentrating, how you've made our house feel like a home. I love how you know exactly when I need coffee, how you leave little notes in my briefcase, how you've memorized all my mother's passive-aggressive techniques and counter them perfectly. I love that you're brilliant at your job and terrible at morning small talk. I love. She kissed him. It wasn't their first kiss. They'd shared hundreds of carefully choreographed public displays of affection. But this was different. This was real, passionate, desperate. His hands tangled in her hair as he pulled her closer. Her fingers gripped his wet shirt, and for a moment, the world disappeared. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Keisha whispered, "I turned down London 2 days ago." Lucas pulled back slightly. "What?" "I couldn't go," she admitted, "not because of the arrangement or the company or any logical reason. I couldn't go because somewhere between fake marriage and real feelings, I fell in love with my husband." The smile that broke across Lucas's face was unlike any she'd seen before. Pure joy, unrestrained by society expectations or business concerns. "When?" he asked, still holding her close. "I think it started the night you tried to make pancakes." She laughed softly. "Or maybe when you got sick and talked in your sleep about how pretty I looked in the morning. Or possibly the first time you actually loaded the dishwasher correctly. That was last week." Better late than never. They stood in the parking garage, wrapped in each other's arms, letting the truth of their feelings wash over them like the rain outside. "What do we do now?" Keisha asked eventually. "Now," Lucas said, "we start over. No arrangements, no conditions, no pretense, just us, building something real." "What about our contract?" "I'll tear it up," he said firmly. "Tomorrow. Right now, I just want to take my wife home and tell her all the things I've been afraid to say." They drove home in comfortable silence, hands linked over the center console. The penthouse felt different when they entered. Not just a stage for their performance, but their home, filled with memories both fake and real. "I have a confession too," Lucas said as they sat on their couch, finally dry and changed. "I've been working on something." He pulled out his phone, showing her a series of emails. "I've been negotiating with Reynolds and Associates. Not about London, about New York. They're interested in a full merger, not just a collaboration. Equal partnership, with you heading the combined marketing division." Keisha stared at him. "When did you plan this?" "The day you told me about London. I couldn't lose you, professionally or personally. But I wanted it to be your choice, not another arrangement. So all this time, while I was agonizing over the decision, I was trying to find a way to give you everything you wanted without asking you to choose," he admitted. I couldn't tell you until I knew how you felt. Real feelings, not obligation." She kissed him again, softer this time. "I love you. I love you too. No pretense, no audience, just us." They spent the night talking, really talking, about everything they'd held back. Lucas confessed how jealous he'd been of James, not just professionally but because he could openly pursue her. Keisha admitted how much she'd grown to hate their careful bedroom distance, how often she'd wanted to cross that space between them. "We've wasted so much time," she said as dawn approached. "We have the rest of our lives to make up for it," Lucas replied, pulling her closer. The next morning, they faced their first test, telling Maxwell Grant the truth. To their surprise, he laughed. "You think I didn't know?" he asked, looking between them. "I've been watching you two fall in love for months." "You knew?" Lucas was stunned. "Son, I've been in business long enough to know that the best partnerships are built on real connections, not just contracts. I just gave you both time to figure that out." 1 year later, the Maldives sunset painted the sky in impossible colors as Lucas and Keisha walked along the beach, finally on their delayed honeymoon. "We should have done this sooner," Keisha mused, letting the warm water wash over her feet. "We weren't ready then," Lucas replied, pulling her close. "We needed to build something real first." The past year had been transformative. The merger between Grant Corp and Reynolds and Associates had created one of the most successful companies in their industry, with Keisha's innovative marketing strategies leading them into new markets. James had indeed gone to London, sending a surprisingly sincere congratulations card when they renewed their vows, this time with real feelings behind the words. Mike and Tricia had gotten engaged last month, a beautiful beachside proposal that their whole friend group had helped plan. "You two inspired us," Mike had said during the celebration, showing us that love can grow in the most unexpected places. Family dynamics had shifted too. Victoria Grant had finally gotten her wish for grandchildren. Charlotte and her husband had welcomed twins, taking some of the pressure off Lucas and Keisha. Though Victoria still dropped hints about grandchildren, they were gentler now, respecting the couple's timeline. "Do you ever think about how this all started?" Keisha asked as they watched the sun sink into the ocean. "The arrangement, the conditions, the act?" "Sometimes," Lucas admitted, "but mostly I think about how it ended, with us choosing each other, not because of business or family or obligation, but because somehow, in the middle of pretending to fall in love, we actually did." Their phones buzzed simultaneously, Mike sending pictures of Tricia's engagement ring designs. They'd asked Lucas and Keisha to be their best man and maid of honor, a role they'd accepted with genuine joy. "Speaking of jewelry," Lucas said casually, "I have something for you." He pulled out a small box, opening it to reveal a stunning sapphire ring. "But I already have a wedding ring," Keisha said, confused. "That ring was part of our arrangement," he explained. "This one is because I fall more in love with you every day. And I want you to have something that represents our real story, not just the one we started with." Tears sparkled in Keisha's eyes as he slipped the ring onto her finger, next to her wedding band. "Perfect fit," she whispered. "Like us," he agreed, pulling her in for a kiss. Their phones buzzed again, this time Charlotte sending ultrasound pictures of the twins. Their friend group chat immediately exploded with excitement and emoji. "We should head back," Keisha said eventually. "We promised to video call them all tonight." "5 more minutes," Lucas murmured against her hair. "I want to remember this moment exactly as at Island." The moment was perfect. The sunset, the waves, the feeling of finally being exactly where they were meant to be. No pretense, no arrangement. Just two people who had found love in the most unexpected way. Back in their beach villa, as they connected with their friends and family, sharing stories and laughter across the miles, both reflected on how their lives had changed. The company was thriving, their relationships were stronger than ever, and their love had grown from a business arrangement into something neither could have imagined. "Ready for bed, Mrs. Grant?" Lucas asked, after they'd said goodnight to everyone. "Always, Mr. Grant," she replied with a smile that was just for him. As they fell asleep in each other's arms, no careful distance between them, both were grateful for the arrangement that had brought them together and the love that had made them choose to stay. Their story hadn't ended with the revelation of their feelings, it had only begun. Each day brought new adventures, new challenges, and new opportunities to choose each other. The pretense had fallen away, leaving something far more valuable. A love that was real, deep, and completely their own. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Before you go, don't forget to drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from. I really love seeing our stories reach various hearts across the globe. And if you enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world and helps me keep bringing you more stories. Thank you.